All right.
Let me see. That is receiving. All right. The pre-show is streaming. We are effectively doing stuff, folks.
Getting pre-showy.
Getting pre-showy. I got rid of my poll.
Is it messing with you?
It's messing with me. Why would it get rid of my poll? I'm gonna put the poll back in. So you're saying people are out and about in San Francisco over the weekend?
Oh, yeah. Well, just where I was at in Land's End, there was a lot of people there during the day, which I guess is to be expected. To be expected. What were you up to?
Did some hiking. Did a hike in Marin.
Where at?
It's called Big Trees. It was at Novatos, so north side of Marin, and some decent views up there. It was a nice trail, a lot of coverage. And then I went out to the coast on Sunday, and did the Pomo Canyon trail. That one was busy. There was a lot of people out at the coast, and that was like at 1 o'clock I went out there. And the fog was already rolling in. So I think everybody, because it was pretty hot, it was in the low 90s inland. And so I think a lot of people just headed out to the coast to escape the heat, because it was in the low 60s when I got out on the trail. All right, let's save this. All right, so I saved the poll. Today we're going to do a little testing, folks. In Facebook, I have never created a poll, and I just created a poll, but I have no idea if it popped up or what happens to the poll. What happens to said poll when you actually create it? Does anybody know?
In theory, we would know.
In theory,
we would think.
One would think. One would hope. But I'm kind of I like to just wing it, see what happens, try stuff out, and see what happens. It's gotten me this far.
Figure it out and see how it goes.
See how it goes. Yeah. You haven't been telling anybody on Facebook how I ended up on the roof of the Oakland Police Department on Saturday. I figured I would just leave a little like curiosity out there.
Yeah.
How does one end up on the roof of the Oakland Police Department?
Probably from a jailbreak, and then you just kept going up and up until you couldn't get any higher.
Yeah, it's kind of like all the movies. They always try and run away from somebody, and they always jump in the stairwells, and they always run up. It's like, what's on the roof that's going to give you safety versus running down and out of the building or something? Or the Geico commercials with, was it Jason that wore the mask?
Yeah, the horror movies joke.
Yeah, where, it's like there's 4 or 5 teenagers and they all run. They're like, let's get in that car. No, we should go into the house upstairs. And the guy's like, oh my gosh. Yeah. And so they end up running into the garage, and it's filled with chainsaws and all these implements of destruction, and they're hiding.
Yeah.
He's just like, oh, I don't know. I guess that's Hollywood for you.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's just the human condition.
Probably when your nervous system's all locked up, you make bad decisions. Hold on, I gotta close my window in case some construction happens.
You got 8 seconds. Make it quick. All right, just in time. Put the earbuds in, and we're going. Dun, dun,
right.
Dun, dun. So what's going on today, Will?
All right. What's up, Ryan? Nice to see you, man.
You too.
Hello, everyone here. This is the No Bucks Given podcast. Yeah, perfect.
Yep,
Right on
just for you.
time, as always. I dig it. My name is Will Cordingly. This is my co-host Ryan. Am I getting it right there? I don't know. Yeah.
Yep, yep. It's always the
And
opposite of what
today,
you think.
yeah, exactly, or how it looks on the screen. Still learning. We're still figuring it out. And you
Yeah,
can say that till, the day you die, because that's kind of how it works for all of
yeah,
us anyways.
yeah.
Still figuring it out. Still learning.
I plan on it,
Yeah.
especially in the
Yeah, I
world we
think,
live in, because things move and shift and change so quickly. It's like what was like, oh, okay, yeah, I got it. Now it's like, what do you mean there's a new technology?
yeah.
Just even sorry, but the new iPhone, I'm not an iPhone, I'm Mr. Android. I don't know if we talked about this, but the new
We did.
13 is
Hmm.
apparently going to have a satellite chip. So if you're out of cell range, it'll be able to communicate to a satellite. And for a person who loves to be outdoors and hiking and stuff, I mean, how great is it just have one device and in an emergency, even if it costs you $5 to send a text, but to be able to have that connection. Anyway, so things are always changing.
Is your life worth $5? I think so. Maybe even a little bit more. Yeah, you did mention that. It's like, will Mr. Android convert? Is that enough? Stay tuned to find out.
Not enough. It'll come
Epic
soon.
battle.
It'll come soon.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you mentioned learning, because I think that might tie in a bit with what we're going to talk about today. Today we're going to talk, and we've kind of touched a bit on it, like from the side and from other areas and other shows, but the Great Resignation going on right now in America and probably other places in the world. But I guess, since we're West and America centric, that'll kind of be the epicenter of the conversation.
Right. Yeah, because you talked about. I'm sorry, you talked about what was it, the lay down, or what is it they're doing in? Is it China, I believe, or is it in Japan? The Great Sit or the Great
in
Lay?
China, there's a movement, the Tang Ping movement, basically just talking about not killing yourself through work, essentially, or like the idea that almost stretching yourself too hard through work doesn't even pay off necessarily anymore. Right. So not trying to do that, and I guess being more simple. Although I don't have the deepest understanding of it, but that's probably another thing related with this.
Yeah, and because I had read that they have what's called 669. So they work 6 days a week. I forget, was it just 6-9? I thought it was 669, but they work 6 days a week, 9 hours a day, essentially.
Really?
So they're trying to get away from that. And it's interesting because if you grew up in poverty, like dire poverty, not just you, but kind of like your whole community, all you knew was poverty. And then because the government changed and business was allowed to come in, it was like, oh, I can go get a job and actually make money to put food on the table. Granted, I got to work 6 days a week, 9 hours a day, and then you get a little bit more money. So now I can afford a dishwasher, and, nowadays they're buying cars, which you go back a generation and, to have a car was kind of a big deal, or maybe 2 generations was a big deal. But the current generation who grew up with all the goodies, they grew up with the refrigerator, they grew up with the car, they grew up with all this. They're like, life is pretty easy. Why would I want to work 6 days a week, 9 hours a day?
Yeah, well, it's a good question, especially especially since in America we're just coming off a holiday weekend for Labor Day, which is a day in America celebrating the actual labor movement, kind of a bit. Well, you're talking about the labor movement in China, but it's all related to how the world's going to function moving forward and how it has functioned in the past, and kind of what we're going to focus on today is driving it towards you meaning like whoever is the listener or viewer right now, because the Great Resignation is just part of what we want to talk about. We want to talk about doing work that matters to you, whatever that means.
Right.
And there's a lot based into that. And there's so many different views about how you can look at this and vantage points. I mean, the old entrepreneurial joke is you have a job just above broke. So it's like, if you're doing 669, it's not actually a path to wealth. Probably it's a path to just getting by, even though you don't have a life, essentially, if that's the hours you are working. Your life and identity are mostly the job you have.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very much so.
And just to kind of future cast a bit about this, where we talked about learning in the beginning, things are changing so rapidly in the world and just in commerce and in business and the way things work. I think the most successful people and the happiest people moving forward are going to be the people who can learn effectively and quickly, and the people who can be flexible and adaptable to how things are going to change.
Right.
And those are old skills. I mean, that's not a new thing. They're just becoming more and more and more important. I forget who said it. I don't know. I want to say it was Peter Drucker, but I could be wrong on that, where it's like the most important skill for any human in the future is being able to learn, essentially. And I would agree with that. I don't think that was Peter Drucker. No, I'm saying, I don't know who it was, but whoever it was, they were correct.
That also kind of falls in with knowledge is power, which, yes, but then you actually have to take action on. So you have to, if you have the knowledge, take action on that knowledge. If you have going to take the time and flexibility to have learning, then you got to be able to incorporate that learning also, versus resisting it and going, no. Because I know some people who don't appreciate change and they just want things the way they were. And, like you said, just the world is moving faster and faster, and it's going to continue to move faster and faster every day. I think that's, it's part of why we have this great resignation that's going on, is that we've had this flexibility called the internet, mobile computers, smartphones, that we've got these systems, these technology systems in place that we didn't necessarily have. And so businesses held on to conventional ways of doing business. And then 2020 happens, and it's like, well, I guess, we thought about this remote worker idea. Maybe we should test it, because we can't have anybody in the office right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting because I think you mentioned in the pre-show, or when we were preparing for this, like, everyone had time to evaluate their life and to evaluate what's going on because of the pandemic. That was one offshoot of the pandemic. And then all these kind of traditional thoughts and conventions and ways of doing things were challenged, because they had no other choice. Companies that would say, we would never, ever have remote work and we would never let you do that, were forced to do that. And by and large, it was completely doable, and things have survived and been okay. I'm sure there's exceptions to that, and I'm sure there was growing pains, absolutely, and still are. But when you have to do something, you do it. Humans are way more malleable and way more kind of creative and just like adaptable to the situations that come up when you have to do them.
Right. Yeah, and the thing
is with organizations.
Yeah, sometimes we just have to be put in the corner. Even though baby don't like being put in the corner, sometimes you got to be put into the corner to push your comfort levels to a place where it's like, oh, okay, I have to take action because this isn't working. It's beyond hope at this point. It's like, it's like when you eat the last nibble of whatever it is and you have no food and no money, people tend to do things that they're not comfortable with. And with that, we push and we move forward. Yeah,
it's an old marketing adage that people are, I forget if it's 2 or 5 times more motivated by moving away from pain than moving towards pleasure. And I think that's hard to measure, but I will say when deadlines come up and you have to get something done, you get it done. Some people aren't that great at planning ahead and forethought. They're just more like, all right, wait till the deadline to do these things.
Right.
I can certainly be that way.
Even though the amount of work that has to be done within a given time gets exponentially greater. Because if you spread out, let's say it's 10 hours of work and you spread it out over 30 days, the amount of work that needs to be done each day, and then it's kind of like, oh, well, I got 20 days left. Well, now you got to do twice as much work in the amount of time, even though it's still 10 hours, but because you have less time. So, yeah. And then at some point we hit the threshold and the brain goes, crap, I've got 8 hours to do 10 hours worth of work. And we get it done.
Yeah. Funny how that happens. And then apparently, it was never 10 hours of work, right? If you did it in less than 10.
Yeah. But it's kind of crazy where we're at with this Great Resignation and the fact that people, and it seems to be across the world, at least there's obvious examples here in the United States. Was it Tang Ping? What did you call it?
Tang Ping movement
going on at a similar time. So it's just kind of interesting that there is this movement where I don't think it's generational, because I feel it also. I have a desire to go, I am ready to do something different with my life. And because I have a couple of different things going on, and it's kind of like, oh, I'm ready, like really ready to make a shift. So I don't think it's not a millennial thing or a gen. Who's under millennials? I forget now. Do we know that
is it Y or Z? I don't know. No,
I forget. Is it Gen Z?
I'm too much of a geriatric millennial to know these things. I'm in the twilight of my years.
And I forget what I am. I'm something.
Aren't you X? You Gen Xer?
Gen X? I don't know. 73. I was born in 73, so wherever that puts me.
Yeah.
I don't know. But so I find it interesting that it's a large population of people, and it's not just in the United States, who are kind of like seriously reevaluating what's important in life, and how many people, one, have identities tied to their job. And then also, two, if you're putting in 40, 50, 60 hours a week at said job, that's a big chunk of your time as a human being is spent working. And so I just find it interesting that so many people are starting to go, I don't like where I'm at, and I want to make a change. Real quick, I want to throw in, I think I put it in the description. Yeah, it's here it is. So this is a Forbes article I'm reading from. According to the latest report by Bankrate, approximately 55% of workers are expected to actively seek new jobs in the next 12 months. And this is an article that was published on September 5th, and today's the 7th. So that was 2 days ago. So so over 50% of workers, and I'm presupposing it's the United States, 55%, over 50% are saying I'm actively seeking a new job. So it's kind of I kind of see it as the Great Resignation, as the Great Reset.
Yeah, I would say it's a part of that. I hadn't heard the Great Reset. That's kind of interesting. Where it's like, God, so much is shifting, politically, socially, economically, work-wise. Like, things are changing pretty drastically and kind of intensely, since the pandemic has kicked up.
Right.
And, the Great Resignation is just one element of that. It's a really interesting element of it, for sure. But the fact that all these things are happening are just kind of ways of explaining the fact that things are kind of moving in a bit tumultuous inside of people. Right. Those are just groups of people. It all nets down to, you and me and to the listener. It's like all these things begin inside of us, in our hearts and in our minds. And I don't quite know how to explain it other than it just seems like the times they are changing.
Yeah, it's almost, I just had the thought while you were saying that because we all have limits of what will endure. And I think a lot of people, life has been good enough for so long. And we have a way of bumping up against those limits, those thresholds, if you will, and then we kind of drop down. And so, and there's thresholds on both ends, right? There's limits or thresholds on both ends. We can be so successful, but not too successful. We can be poor, but not too poor. We can be rich, but not too rich. So there's these bumps on either end. And I kind of get the sense that where most people were kind of, they found that happy medium, and you kind of get into the rut, if you will, of living and, oh, okay, I'm just going to resign myself to, I got to pay the bills. This is my job. It is what it is. I've got a kid or whatever it is, at least I can go out on the weekends and drink with the buddies or go fishing. I've got a balance. And I kind of feel 2020 stepped in and just went boom, boom, and kind of knocked us around a little bit. And then those limits or those thresholds, we got pushed way past. And so it's kind of like, again, you put baby in a corner, I got to react. And so it allows for self-reflection. It's almost like a midlife crisis, if you will, where you're like, damn, what have I been doing? Oh, I know. I'll go buy a Porsche. That'll make me happy. And I can feel good about myself, regain my youth and all those types of things. So I almost feel like we just got kind of slapped in the face in 2020, and it pushed people beyond that kind of tightrope, that balance that so many people have been walking for so many years, that they said, this is acceptable. And now it allowed us to reevaluate, and you get the ball rolling. Well, I was talking to Sally, and Sally said she's going to quit her job and do this online thing, selling stuff on Etsy. And now Jan's talking about doing it too. Well, shit, maybe I could do it also. I mean, if they can quit their job and be successful, maybe I can.
Yeah.
And then pretty soon, 55% of the workers are expected to actively seek new jobs in the next 12 months.
Yeah, it's a huge percentage. My goodness. And stuff catches on in groups of people like that. I had heard, I was a bit iffy on this. I don't know if I should say it, but I'll say it anyways. They say like divorces in friends groups kind of go viral. It's kind of that concept where like if people break up or get a divorce, like that actually puts that in, the people related to them's minds as well. And sometimes it like picks up, and if there's been, secret underlying things, they start to come more to the surface.
Yeah.
And that would be the same with half of the workers looking for new work. It's like, I didn't realize how unhappy I was until I was forced to, potentially. And maybe you're incredibly unhappy and miserable, and maybe you're just not fulfilled enough and things are good enough, which is almost more of a trap sometimes.
Yeah.
So it's good that people are evaluating this stuff, and it's good. It's good that companies are forced to think about how to, retain people. Like,
I'm so glad I do not have employees at this time. As far as I'm concerned, 1099 is the way to go. You need support. 1099. It's kind of like even renting houses. I was watching an article, was on the, it was a Bay Area. This gal owned 3 houses that were rentals, and 2 of the 3 people are not paying. And because of the government rules in place, you're not allowed. She's homeless. She's got a daughter, like a preteen daughter. They're living out of a car, even though she owns these houses. But because she can't move people out of the house that she owns, she's living homeless. And it's kind of like it's a pretty tough situation. And I have no idea why I went off on that tangent, but I'm assuming it was important at the time. It was like relevant to something that you said. I
Yeah.
forget what it
Oh,
was.
okay.
Um,
Well, let's regather ourselves.
oh, you were talking
Why
about
would?
like meaningful work and those types of things. And I think the millennials really brought that to light as far as, it seems, and we're generalizing here and we're kind of naming a group. It doesn't encompass everybody.
Mhm.
But it's that, the millennials were like, hold it. I don't want to spend money on a business that doesn't do good in the world, or that doesn't represent the values that I want. And
Mhm.
so you started seeing people going, oh, actually have a say financially. Do I want to spend my money here, or do I want to spend my money here, where somebody is actually, maybe they're, like Tom's shoes, that for every pair that are purchased, they give a pair away to charity.
Yeah, I believe so. I believe so.
So kind of, different thoughts that way, and how that's now worked into the workplace also, where people can go, hey, yeah, I can make a lot of money here, but I don't necessarily, their company values aren't necessarily in line with my values. And so I don't want to have a job with you. I'd rather work here. And according to a 2018 study by Better Up Labs, 9 out of 10 workers will trade on average 23% of their future earnings to be able to do meaningful work. So I'm assuming meaningful work is one for the employee itself, but
Mhm.
also the business that they're working at is probably in alignment with them. And I think the more in
Yeah.
alignment, then you feel like you're doing meaningful work and you're happier, and you'll take less money to have a happier life. And that's kind of what the show's all about, is living your authentic life.
Yeah, and I think the show's mainly about making it all one long day. How can your work be, an expression of your authenticity? They don't
Mm-hmm.
have to be two separate things. Your work doesn't have to be separate from your happiness or like who you truly are.
Right.
And who people truly are. I mean, that can be so varied. Some people, you kind of mentioned a couple different things. Some people are happy just to like do their work, and the fact that they did it is fulfilling in and of itself. Some people need to work towards a cause that is, bigger than them and feels
Mm-hmm.
like more important and more meaningful. I mean, there's no kind of right way to do it and no judgment about
Right.
that, unless you're working, building the Death Star or something. And even those people, some of them are probably fulfilled too,
Sure.
doing that sort of work.
Yeah.
But it all nets down to like getting clear about what you want. Like, how are you going to do meaningful work? Well, I guess the first step is deciding what that means to you and what it includes and what's important to you.
Mm-hmm.
Is an important, does it have to be a goal that's meaningful in the world to you? Or is it the functions of the role that are meaningful to you? Or is it the fact that you contribute to a team and are seen and recognized for doing that? Does that make it meaningful? Or
Right.
does it mean it pays you well enough to pursue the hobby that really lights up your life on the weekends and in the evenings or whatever it is, and work is just work? Some people are happy to do it that way.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of just depends. So for everyone like listening, the first step is getting super clear about what you want, because work's significant, as you talked about. It's a significant portion of your time on the planet, most likely, and in your week. 40 to 80 hours a week, depending on what you do.
Right.
And a bit about how you identify yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, and
So these things are important.
Yeah, and there are people that are finding out that working 50, 60 hours doesn't necessarily equal happiness. You have the money, but if you're spending large sums of money to live in a big city, as an example, and, like I was saying, I was in Oakland on Saturday, went out to a mac and cheese place, and it was almost it was over $28, almost $30 for a bowl of mac and cheese and a non-alcoholic drink. it was $28 and some odd cents after a tip and all. And I'm like, damn, you know, because up here in Sonoma County, you can go find those places really easy, but it's not where I typically would eat out at. And so kind of making different choices. Maybe you don't have to work 60, 50, 60 hours. There are so many people that I've been reading and watching reports on who are moving out of city. Well, it's even happened in San Francisco. And so many people went to Tahoe as an example. And unfortunately they're having to deal with the fires in Tahoe right now. But it's almost like it's part of that identity shift. It's like, well, do I have to live in the city? Do I have to have a job that requires an hour commute? Do I have to work 50, 60 hours a week? Do I have to wear a suit or dress up in a professional, you know, kind of all of that stuff are things to think about as far as kind of what's important, and understand that you may have some identity attached to what it is you're doing. You know, before the show started, we were talking about a friend of mine who actually, you know, who after 18 years had to medically retire out of the police department. And it was a real struggle for this individual. And a lot of it had to do with their identity. And not really, it's like, this is all I know to do, you know, who else can I possibly be? And that can be a real scary question sometimes. If I don't do this, what do I do?
Yeah. And it kind of, that old kind of dark joke is, you know, the number one killer is retirement. I think and that another way of saying that is when people retire without ways to fill their time or without meaning or interest to pursue, like that kind of takes a toll on our psyche and on our bodies in ways that's kind of obvious and kind of really hard to explain sometimes too.
Yeah.
Like, do we have meaningful reasons to stick around? And of course, it's like you can retire and be totally fine, but
sure,
statistically speaking, that lines up, you know.
Yeah. And she's not in a place where can just retire. She had to retire from that job. So it's kind of like, well, if I have to retire from this job, but I still need to continue to work, you know, and then kind of the same thing. If you're going through the Great Resignation, but you've been working at the same type of job, maybe not even the same company, but you're like, I've been a banker for 15 years, or I've been an accountant, or I've been an attorney, or whatever it is for so long, our identity gets wrapped up in that. And this is all we can see. I can only see a banker. I can only see an attorney. I can only see a police officer. It's like, how can I do anything else? And the nice thing about not knowing is that all things are possible. And while it can be
this is where
scary,
it ties back into learning. This is where I think it was in Sapiens, and kind of a distance mentor of mine used to talk about this a lot. He's like reinvention is going to be one of the most important skills for humans moving forward. I think that's in the book Sapiens, I believe. The idea that, you, as one example of infinite examples, maybe you're going to have to be forced to medically retire from the police force after 18 years, and you're going to have to reinvent yourself. And, you know, I'm not making light of that at all. That's a huge endeavor, or it can be. But it's also going to be incredibly important for kind of all of us to have that frame inside of us where it's like, well, we might have to not start over, but reinvent. It's like take everything that we are and maybe like take pieces of it and get rid of some pieces and reinvent ourselves in something new. Because the future is coming so quickly and change is happening so rapidly, it's going to be an incredibly important skill. And I think everyone should have their attention on that to a certain degree, that learning and learning effectively and quickly is important. and being able to, that's the main component of reinventing yourself
Right.
in case you want to resign and go a different direction, which a lot of people are doing as well.
Right.
They're maybe not just looking for the same job at a better company. They might be looking to do something totally different. There's a lot of that as well.
Right. And I think part of that for those people that are kind of going through that thought or are in that transition is just understand that there's going to be a lot of emotions and feelings. There could be fear, there could be doubt, some sort of being scared. And that is all part of the human experience. So it's not something that people need to run away from or be afraid of. I was trying to find a different word than be afraid of, but just recognize. Go ahead.
Well, it can be incredibly uncomfortable and, emotionally painful.
Right.
And we're built to avoid that stuff unless you make meaning about it being a good thing. But
yeah. And I think uncomfortable is a great word, much better than fearful, in the sense that this process should be uncomfortable. And that's actually a good sign, and allow yourself to spend some time in that uncomfort, because it's in that uncomfort that new discoveries are made. And I think a lot of times people kind of react, especially if you do the knee-jerk reaction or the quick, you're not allowing yourself enough time to be in that emotional state. While it can feel uncomfortable in whatever ways that it does, is understand that that's normal. It's going to go away. And underneath that is going to be some really great insights and some new perspectives and opportunities and options that maybe you didn't even know existed or were a possibility, that will come out of that in time. So I just want to let sure people know that it's okay to have those feelings, and it's okay to dislike being uncomfortable, because that's totally the human experience. Congratulations. But do your best to sit with them, find some people that can support you and allow you to get to the next step. It's kind of like the gentleman that I've brought up a couple of times who, I forget if he was going through Ranger or SEAL training or something, but he had to go through Hell Week. And he knew if he was focused on the end 7 days, he would never make it. But they were fed every 6 hours. So his focus was just getting to the next 6 hours. That's all he focused on. And if his mind wandered off to tomorrow or 3 days away, he brought it back, so that he just needed to get to the next step. So he could get to the next step. So he could get to the next step, so that he could get to the end. Because when you're at the beginning, the end might seem far away, but there's all these little steps that we have to go through beforehand, and allow yourself to focus on all those individual little steps in order to get to the end.
Yep. Yeah, micro chunking is a really important skill in any endeavor, especially big ones like this. I had something, I totally lost it. Anyway,
you check your ear.
Maybe
it's behind the microphone.
That was a good trick. Was that a quarter?
So I think
grandfather used to do that.
Oh, did he? Is that how you got your money?
Pull the coin from behind the ear.
Yeah. Very cool. So while you're thinking about that, because I know as soon as you get distracted, you'll be like, oh yeah. For people that are going through that, one, know that it's uncomfortable. Two, I would also say, try and remember that when you don't know, that all things are possible. So allow all things be possible. And because a lot of times people will go, what I've seen, and I do this sometimes, and I have to remind myself, don't do that, Ryan, is, oh, okay, I would like to do this, or this, or I would like to do this. And then with that, whatever it is that I want, comes all of the reasons why it's going to be difficult, or all the reasons why it can't happen, or just all the reasons. And those are filters that are built from the past, or not built, but they were created in the past, and they don't necessarily apply to the future. They don't have to apply to the future. And remembering that the unconscious, subconscious, and I think it's the subconscious mind always says yes.
Yeah.
So when you say, I want X, it says yes. And then when you say, oh, but it's going to be hard because of, it says yes. And, oh, I don't think I can do that because it says yes. So it's kind of one of the cool things about the way the brain works is it works for you. It works on your behalf. And when you tell it what you want, it will say yes. But as you've added in all these other filters and all of these reasons why it can't happen, you kind of muddle things up. It's kind of like asking a GPS, like, GPS, get me from here to here, but let's not go the direct route. Let's go the hard way, where I'm more than likely going to blow out a tire because we're on a fire road with super sharp rocks. And of course I don't have a spare. So, I'm only going to be able to get part way up the hill, and then I'm going to get a blowout, and I'm going to have to turn around, or I'm going to have to call for help. And it's just, it's going to be too hard to get there. And the brain will say, yes, okay, let's do that.
Do it the hard way. Yep.
Do it the hard way versus just going, hey, what's the easiest way from getting to point A to point B, and not worrying about the details, and allow the unconscious mind to find and filter the things that will get you there in the quickest and simplest way possible.
Yeah. And that is the way to go. And it takes an extreme level of self-belief and kind of faith in yourself and faith in the process, which is really beautiful. If you can get there. I always kind of think about, the third Indiana Jones movie where he has to, take the step to the Holy Grail, take the step in the
chasm.
We have to walk into the chasm, and the bridge appears essentially.
Right.
It's kind of like that.
Yeah.
And the stakes feel that high sometimes too. Like it does feel a bit like life and death. And when you get in, when work is concerned, it's not truly life and death, the vast majority of the time. But when it's your mortgage and your rent and your grocery money and, your kids' tuition and those kind of things, it feels like that, if not worse in some ways, just depending on the situation.
Yeah.
But what you said, in that space of confusion, all things are possible. That is beautiful. And it's really true, because our minds, our minds operate like incomplete maps of the world. We have our experience that colors in what we know is possible for ourselves and what we believe is true about ourselves and about the world.
Right.
But it's so wildly incomplete compared to like the objective reality of the planet and what's possible for us. So when we think about what we want, it's off this backdrop of the past inside of our minds, but our futures don't have to be our past. And in fact, the majority of the time, we desperately don't want our futures to be our past, just depending on what it is.
Right. Consciously, we don't.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
But unfortunately, the subconscious mind has a different agenda. It's called safety. You must stay safe.
Yeah.
And we know pain. Well, you survive pain, so we will continue to endure the pain so you can stay safe. Because I don't really give a fuck if you're happy. I just want you to be alive.
Yeah, and it almost doesn't even want it for you. It just does its job without any consideration. So it's almost just like a horse with blinders on. It just does things. It doesn't want anything for you.
Right.
Necessarily.
What was Arnold Schwarzenegger in the first Terminator? He was the T-2000 or whatever it was.
Is it the T-1000? It's been a while.
Something like that. But that's kind of the way the brain works. It literally, it's pretty black and white in that regards. And it's I think it was Carl who used the analogy of if you went to a hotel and you had a room, you got a room right in the middle of the hotel. And so if you walked out of your room, you went to the left, there would be a stairway, emergency exit stairway, exactly as far away as if you went out of your hotel room to the right. They're both equally distance apart. There's a fire, and the fire happens right where you're at. So as you exit the hotel room, do you go right or do you go left? Both are the same. You choose whichever way, and it's painful and it hurts because the fire is right there, but you survive and you make it out. And then years later, there you are again in another hotel room in a different place, but you're equally distanced, and a fire breaks out. If you went left the first time, your brain is going to go left the second time because it knows that's survivable. Yeah. There is no logic. I mean, there's logic in there, but there's not like prefrontal cortex logic involved in that. It just simply says, we survived this, so we're going to do it this way again because I know it's survivable.
Yeah. It's not saying, is it right for me to go left this time again? You know, when so many other people are not able to do it, it doesn't make those kind of judgments. It just does its job without much consideration. And that's kind of a high level way of thinking about how work operates in our lives. If you have patterning to kind of put yourself second, or, you know, find yourself in toxic environments or with abusive bosses or coworkers, you know, unfortunately, you probably have found yourself in a work situation that stabilizes these kind of emotional patterns to play out, for better or worse. Consciously, we would say for the worse, you know, in deeper parts of our brain, maybe for the better, because it's, as you said, it's your brain's just going left again. That's all it is. We learned that this is survivable, so we're just trying to survive, basically.
In service of you, I will make sure that you have an abusive boss or whatever that situation is. So it's almost, it's kind of like if you're part of that 55% of the people out there who are seriously considering a new job because maybe you don't feel appreciated where you're at, or you do have one of those abusive bosses. And, you know, abuse comes in all forms of variations. So it's kind of like your interpretation of whatever that is. Kind of realize that if that's your patterning, that when you seek for a new job, that pattern is going to show up. It may not show up initially. I was always kind of blown away, and I think it was Carl who talked about this, where people will find a job and it's great. They love it. Everything's fine. And then 6 months, 9 months, a year later, somebody retires, something happens, and now the boss is gone and there's a new person in there. And it's just the worst thing ever. And it's like, why? I found a great job. I had this great people around me. I had this great support structure. I felt great. I felt like I belonged, and that I was doing something that had meaning. And then this new boss comes in and just totally doesn't like me. And it's like a flashback to the past. So those,
it's eerie. And I've had that experience before.
Have you?
Before I met Carl Buchheit, where he tells that story, he's like, it's hard to bear happiness if you don't have patterning to have. So even if you get yourself in a good situation, somehow it undoes itself over time. I was like, holy shit. I was in a job finally with a boss who really, really appreciated my skill set and my contribution. And she was great. And she's like, yeah, this is really good. And then she ended up leaving, and her replacement did not like my skill set, and I did not like her. And it played out exactly how you just explained. And it can be incredibly disheartening. Yeah.
Oh, I imagine. Yeah, because it was all so great, and then powers outside of my control took it all away. And so the kind of the key thing there is just realize that patterns do show up in workplace as they do in life. And so if you're part of the Great Resignation and you're ready to move on, and there are some things that you want to change, just realize that that still starts with you. So it's kind of like grass is always greener on the other side. You find a new job, got to do what you got to do to make yourself happy. But if you find that even that new job, a lot of the same things show up, is then there's got to be kind of this, you got to flip the mirror on yourself and take a look at what's going on and what is it in your system that is attracting these things to happen in your life.
Yeah. And it's the most powerful question and frame kind of out there, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can do it without blame and shame and
Right.
self-annihilation, that's not what we're talking about here. And we're not talking about victim blaming either. I don't love that term because I think it's kind of inaccurate. It's more like what could possibly be less victimy and more empowering than saying we have the power inside of us to make our lives what we want them to be.
Right.
If we can kind of own the fact that it can be challenging when we don't understand why what we're getting is not what we consciously want. It's incredibly challenging to be like, well, what do you mean I own that? Or like, this is my experience, except it is your experience and you have to bear it, whether you deny that you have anything to do with it or not. It's still going to be your experience.
Right.
And it's all breadcrumbs to well-being. That's how I look at it. And it doesn't really matter what the context is. It could be your job, it can be your career, it could be your romantic relationships, it can be your friendships, it could be whatever these big, your wealth creation and your money, whatever is going on. Whatever the pain is in any of those, they're all indicators of stuff to look at inside of ourselves and revise.
Right.
It's all indications of probably patternings running in our minds that are outdated. They're not serving us anymore. They're working against us.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm glad you brought up, that it is something we need to honor and respect because it's gotten you where you're at today. Every decision that you've made leads you to where you are today. So we need to honor and respect that because it's kept you alive all of these years, which is super important. And sometimes when our good friends tell us something that maybe hurts a little bit because it's true, that is kind of that self-reflection of, okay, maybe I need to take a look at this at a deeper level. Because we often don't see it ourselves. We talk a lot about having blind spots. We all have blind spots. They're built in to our systems and the way that our brain works. And so when our friends, family, people that really care about us, that are willing to say some uncomfortable things sometimes, those are the ones you kind of want to tilt your head a little bit, listen, and go, I wonder why they said that. And what is it? What's going on internally in me that is generating that? Because that can lead to some big stuff to work on.
Yeah. I mean, if you have those kind of people in your life, cherish them. It's incredibly valuable. Yeah. And that doesn't mean everything that someone says that kind of hurts is actually true or valid either. It can totally go the other way. It's
especially if they're drunk.
Yeah. Be discerning.
Yeah. Very much so.
But
very much
people
so.
people whose opinions are worth respecting and who care about you and, you feel safe with them, those are important people in your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're often worth.
And it's interesting because when you live a certain way for so long, it becomes normal. It's kind of like if you grew up here in the United States and you were not around nudist colonies or anything, that could be very jarring to the system. But if you were born and raised in a nudist colony where it was very normal to see people naked all the time, and maybe that's all you ever saw, it could be very jarring to go to a community where people were in clothing all the time. And because it's so normal and natural for us to live in certain ways, we don't necessarily realize that maybe that wasn't the best analogy. We don't necessarily realize that we're kind of this way or that way, so far left or right, or that we're so anxious, or that we're so whatever it is.
Yeah, well, yes, I mean, our brains are designed to do what they do, and things run the way they run, and we don't have necessarily the best perspective on ourselves. Sometimes we do, but sometimes, your romantic partner or your friend, like, I can't believe you let your boss talk to you like that. Right. And you're like, what do you mean? That's just how they are, and this is what we do. And like, no, this isn't normal. This isn't like, do you not understand that this isn't like healthy or normal? Mm-hmm. But your brain's just like, it doesn't actually detect problem. It doesn't detect threat.
Right.
So these kind of, in this specific instance, like, what do you mean?
Some much better analogy. Thank you.
It's less tittillating, but maybe more relevant to the Great Resignation. But I get what you're saying. I mean, in America, we don't really have widespread nudist colonies, and you're like, oh, the French, that's so much different than America.
Yeah.
But maybe that's changing too.
Well, I think I've told you my thought on all of that is it's because when the founders landed on the East Coast back, Mayflower days and whatnot, they landed in during one of the worst winters ever, apparently. And it's like, no wonder why they were cranky and like trying to blame other people and like Puritans, like, oh, it's like I would be so frustrated and angry and whatnot. I'm imagining this during that time that no wonder why I would lash out at people and go, I can see your ankles, damn it. You're not a good person. Cover yourself up. Whereas if we had landed on the West Coast in LA, people have been like, damn, it's hot out here. We're going to have a new dress code here, folks. And wow, everybody seems to be happy because, there's plenty of water. Well, I think there was plenty of water back then, and food and all of those types of things. And life was good and we enjoyed life. And it's like, how different of a country would it have been if they had landed on the West Coast instead of the East Coast? I think they would have just been happier people in general. And that would have kind of dictated the, just the overall feeling vibe of the community, of the nation, I should say.
I have no idea. Maybe.
No idea.
The environment absolutely impacts everything about how things are shaped and how we look at things. The environmental influence of stuff. And then I guess, the religious beliefs and that come in, how would they intersect differently? Right. I guess we'll never know.
We'll never know. Or we could make a movie about it and we'll let people know. So
say the What If movie. Yeah.
What If movie. Yeah.
Reimagining. Okay.
Ooh, the Great Reimagining. There we go. Instead of the Great Resignation, we should call it the Great Reimagining. Now is your time, folks, to reimagine who you want to be and what do you want to do.
I guess that's another way of describing it. People are kind of reimagining what's possible for them and what, the way work plays a role in their life and in their family and their priorities, essentially. Right. I think that we talked a bit about it. Yeah. The pandemic comes along and puts death in everyone's face in one way or another, either real or imagined. And you're kind of like, I have to think about this. I have to look at my life from a different perspective now that, this thing has come in and changed the world probably forever. It'll take a long time for us to see how that plays out, but when we put our attention on what we want, again, work just being one impetus you could do this in, maybe your work life's amazing and you just can't get romantic relationship to work for you. It doesn't really matter what the context is, except, it does, but the impetus comes from different contexts. But it's all calling for us to put our attention on what we would like instead of that consciously. And then that helps push to the surface these unconscious beliefs, these unconscious barriers, these unconscious parts of our identity that keep that coming about. And then once things are brought to the light, that's when they can be changed, or that they changed naturally to a certain degree. That certainly happens.
Right.
But this is where it starts. This is where we say, well, okay, my work's unfulfilling. What would I like instead? And get really specific about that. Yeah. And maybe it's the work, maybe it's the environment, maybe it's the boss, maybe it's all of it. It kind of just depends.
Yeah. Or it's what flexibility the job provides so you can spend more time for yourself or your family or doing things that you enjoy doing, which I think people are starting to figure that out, that, okay, well, how important is it for me to be happy? There's the old saying, if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy, or if the wife ain't happy, nobody's happy, type of a deal. And so kind of taking that to heart and going, okay, well, hold it. If I'm not happy, how can other people around me be happy? May it be personally, work, whatever it may be. So now is a great time to figure it out because a lot of that energy is going around. So, it seems like it's a great opportunity. And if you are a person who enjoys working for somebody, there are so many places looking for quality employees. Now is such a great time because your chances of choosing, being able to find 3 or 4 maybe new employment options, and then really being able to ask the questions, the weight is in your favor right now as an employee, that you get to dictate the terms. You get to choose who you want to work for.
Yeah.
So it's a great time to do it.
Yeah, it's interesting. And we'll see how the future plays out. I think some of the biggest industries having the hardest times right now, are in the service industry and jobs like that. And it almost seems like the industries probably first that are going to be disrupted by like automation and robotics and stuff in the future, whenever that kicks in, seems to be the ones that are hardest to get people to want to do now, because they're tough jobs and they don't pay well usually.
Yep. Yeah. So now's your chance. Reinvent, learn, feel through the pain, that uncomfortableness, and from that, new options will come. And there's no such thing as failure, just learning.
Yeah. So, and that's kind of they can be more complex, but if you just choose what you want mentally, you put your attention on what you would like, and then feel the feelings, as Ryan said, go through the motions, feel the feelings, don't push them away or deny them. Right. If you actually feel that stuff, a lot of things can shift naturally. It seems like the winds of change are actually, kicking up these days.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
All righty, sir. Anything else you would like to add to today's show?
I don't think so.
All right.
Go forth and do work that is meaningful and enjoyable to you, whatever that means to you.
You need to do that in a very, very go forth into the world and do.
Go forth and do work that doesn't suck.
There you go.
We'll put it in the away from too, just for those kind of people as well.
Yeah. All right, perfect. Well, if you have questions, comments, thoughts, feel that we said something wonderful or stupid, let us know in the comments below. We always love to hear your comments and thoughts.
I'm sure there was plenty of both today.
I'm sure there was. I think more good than bad this time. We did pretty good. All right, with that, always good to see you, Will. Thank you much, and look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you, Ryan. You too.